Hello, friends. It's Amy Calandrino, and I'm coming back to you with another performance mindset show. I'm your host, again, Amy Calandrino, CEO of Beyond Commercial and author of the book From Perfect to Real. This show is all about leveling up in business, real estate, leadership, and life by shifting how you think, grow, and lead. Each week, I bring you real conversations with top performers and mindset experts who are building big lives on their own terms. If you're ready to ditch perfection, trust your path, and grow with intention, you are in the right place. Be sure to subscribe, and let's get into it. Today, I have with me Danielle Sprouls, and she is also known as the WTF girl.
The WTF lady.
Oh, lady. I was like, that's not right. So, yeah. But of course, I'm from Perfect to Real, so we're just going to let that roll. There we go. And she has her own podcast, Unscripted Pivots.
Mm-hmm.
And is also a coach and attorney, but not practicing attorney.
Correct.
And has been in commercial real estate and the title industry and a whole host of other things. And she talks about that all in her book, which I just finished reading, and it was wonderful. Women That Flourish. And it's been on Amazon. And where else is it available?
Right now it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
I self-published through that platform, so it's not on Barnes and Noble or anything. I'll pursue that route in a minute. Yeah.
You got to do a little bit at a time. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Just launching my own book. It's a big, big journey. So for those that haven't maybe read the book, can you talk a little bit about your background, how you've ended up where you are now, where you're an author, podcaster, and coach, and give us some insights, and we'll go from there.
And all the things. So the book's title is WTF. Underneath there, it says Women That Flourish. The tagline is transform your what the F moments into your greatest wins. And so the Women That Flourish, it's under the WTF because it was the very first WTF that came into existence and became what is now my entire brand. And that came into being because of the podcast, which right now it's on hiatus because I'm still toying with the idea of like what I'm going to do with it. It exists. It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all the platforms. But I stopped recording in October. And I wanted to speak to women like all around the country about like all the pivots in their life, like all the WTF moments or, even just the happy, like, how did you get here? And so I grabbed a microphone off of Amazon, turned on the computer, fired it up and said, okay, so Amy, how are you? I saw you at a conference last week. Like, how did you get to be where you are? And I was really enjoying that process, but I didn't want to say WTF. I was part of corporate America, so what are you going to call that? And I'm an acronym nerd. And I've always been into acronyms. I see conversations and acronyms.
Yeah.
And so as do you. We'll talk about your book. That's why the synergy is awesome. I said, okay, we're going to call it Inspiring Stories from WTF, Women That Flourish. And that's how this whole thing came into existence. And from the podcast became a whole coaching framework. And when I left doing commercial real estate title insurance last year, after 23, 24 years, I still have some clients that are active on the East Coast. So I'm still very much in the circles, but I'm no longer leading with that persona. And so from the podcast, I had a book in mind and I had written out chapter titles and things. And I kind of put it on the back burner because we're busy, right? We have careers, we have families, we have plans. And somebody called me, out recently and said, hey, you have a book. Why haven't you published or written it yet? And so I got real busy and I did a very deep dive. And I will tell you, it really became the full-time project for about 9 months. And when you work for yourself, you have that luxury to do that, so
Right.
No longer was I running around to all the real estate conferences. So I was able to just devote all this time. And I think, Amy, in all honesty, I felt compelled to have something tangible that was speaking what I was saying, which was like, hey, I'm the WTF lady. Somebody else came up with that, by the way. Somebody called me that after me coming up with all these WTF acronyms like, when transition fuels, wake that flame, who to follow, wisdom through failure, all these WTF acronyms I was regularly using, but I wasn't feeling comfortable embracing that persona. So I thought, I'm going to write a book. So people, at least they can there's some evidence of what I'm saying. And in there, I was able to do a deep dive into what what my coaching framework is and get real intimate with it. So it really solidified what my message is by doing that. You, as a fellow author, well know that even though you're speaking these things and you've created these frameworks or these systems, when you write about them and you really pay close attention to how you're going to share that, to teach that, to articulate it, you really become like besties with it. It's just a different feel. You mentioned that, yes, attorney, commercial real estate, all the things. My life looks very different than what, the younger version of Danielle had planned. And I go through that. You read the book. And by the way, I noticed, guys, so I know Amy. Well, we're just getting to know each other. I saw her. I saw her on X, and I started to look at people who are on X and went to like the main stomping ground, which is LinkedIn. Messaged her there and said, "Hey, I know you from X, or I've seen you or something." And so with that, we started to like have a little bit of the DM conversation, and it was so cool because then there was another person, Allison Weiss, who was mentioning Amy. So that this is just like the ripple effect. People start mentioning other people, and I'm like, oh, she's already on my radar. So that's how this whole thing came. And so when I went on X the other day, I noticed you were posting pictures of your recent travels, and there you are. And my book is like on your Kindle. So you have a picture of like, what's going on in there. And I was like, oh, look at that. Like that was so super cool. So thank you for that. I almost missed it.
I went to tag you and I went at Danielle and I'm at the beach or whatever when I posted it. And I was like, I didn't think. And then I noticed afterwards, I'm like, oh, that's her handle. And then now I'm following it.
So my handle, the WTF lady, is pretty much across the board. I mean, certainly if you put in my name, Danielle Sprouls, and if you Google that, it's going to come up WTF lady, but that really is my brand because I'm on a mission to redefine what WTF means and how people experience it. So that's truly, what the book's about. But, the younger version of Danielle wanted to be an obstetrician, went to college for pre-med, and learned very quickly 2 years later that I probably wasn't smart enough to pursue that. And after a very serious conversation with my guidance counselor, he said, you're struggling in the math. I'm not good at numbers, lady. I'm just not. Like, it's not my strength. My strength is writing. So I pivoted into law. I thought, well, I'm not done with higher education. And that's literally how I became a lawyer. I was still hungry for more. And, my father was a lawyer. It wasn't like that was such a foreign concept. Went to law school and, was married, had kids, stayed home for about 8 years. And then, I'd never planned on being a stay-at-home mom. Like there was another big pivot. I wanted children, but I also wanted a career. And so, there you have it. And then one night at a party, somebody said, hey, you want a job? Because they knew that I was looking to get out, and it was an attorney. And I thought, there's my entree back into law. And no, he had a commercial title insurance firm, which I knew nothing about, zero. I mean, I know what title insurance is conceptually, but I know nothing about it to sell it. And then off to the races. And that literally became my career for a couple decades. And so it just fascinates me. I'm not special in that so many people, women and men, pivot from one thing to the next because life just hands you curveballs, which I want to redefine as opportunities, so, and here I am. And today, full time, I am doing executive coaching for, ambitious professionals that are in a season of transition or they're feeling stuck or even, they're leveling up and they're wondering, how can I fill these big shoes? I got this big promotion. I got this big raise. What am I doing? It doesn't even matter like how far along you are in your career. There are just seasons for all of us where we'll start to question or doubt our capabilities or not be able to access tools that we have. They're in the toolbox, but we can't access them for whatever reason. And the smart ones, they ask for help because they have less tolerance for living in that pain and elongating the process to get to the other side. So that's where I meet people in the messy middle. And I love it. I just love it. So that's what I do. And yes, now we can put both you and I, author, next to our name. I think we both published in April. And how cool is that? I mean, it really, and I'm already halfway done with the second book. So if you would have said to me 4 years ago, you're going to be writing books, I mean, it was kind of in my heart, but no way did I think that it would really dominate my calendar the way it is today. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. My children, they sense I'm going to write again. So it was so funny. I had them record a message for me and I said, hey, congratulate me on my book and, have them hold a sign on the day it released. And they said, congratulations, Mom, on your first book. And I'm like, oh, look at them first. Like I did not tell them to say that. And they said that. And I was like, See, that's the universe speaking to you, and so to me. But I'm going to take a little bit of a break from writing myself personally. I've really enjoyed it, but I'm super blessed to have a nice hefty pipeline that's keeping me busy. I was just hammering out another deal right before we got on the podcast, which is awesome.
Well, you know what? It wasn't my intention because you know firsthand how demanding the process
Yeah.
is. What happened was I wrote WTF and I had anticipated releasing it around an event. So I thought that I would have it done faster than not. And that was not happening. And so I slowed my roll a bit. And a friend of mine said, are you going to use this as a business tool? Because you're coming out with your framework and you're explaining in depth, like how you coach. And she said, and I said, yes. And she said, well, why don't you just slow your roll? Why don't you have somebody that's like kind of like in the industry that doesn't know you whatsoever to take an objective look at your work? And, my first thought was like, well, geez, I don't want anybody rewriting this thing. Like this just took like 10 months, like I'm done, and also how much is that going to cost? Because when you're a solopreneur and you're starting out, there's a budget around most things because the
Oh
corporate
yeah.
paycheck, went bye-bye. And, but I listened to her because that's what I do today. I will listen to respected sources of information because what I know today, Amy, it's not even just that person that's saying it, but it's like, the universe, for me, I call it God, is directing me and my attention towards something. And I
Yes.
will, if I feel that gut punch where it's like, this is important, I now honor that inner voice, right? So the self-talk looks very different. So I thought, okay, I called up the guy, his name is Michael Ashley. And he's not even in California. And I asked him to read it. He told me how much it would cost. He gave me 2 different ways to do this whole thing. I took the least expensive way. And so he's like, I'll write it. We'll have a 2-hour conversation and I'll just couple notes. And we did that. And this is why I'm writing the second book, because what he said to me was, he said, if you are coming out as the WTF lady, and if you want to capture more clients and maybe get some paid speaking gigs, he's like, your book's good. Your book will do that for you. He said, but really at the core of this book, Danielle, is not so much the WTF moments, but the importance of pivots. He said, if you are approaching the business community and you want to start working in that space, what you want to write is a book about business pivots. And go ahead, throw another acronym into your system. Do you have one? The next day I came back with him and, with the PIVOT, what my system would be. And he said, that's your book. And he said, so consider that. And I said, I'm considering it now. Let's do it. And I said, it'll never be easier in 3 years. Let's go for it. Because listen, I'm not 40, right? And so I'm redefining. I'm not even redefining. I'm honoring like what my path is
Yeah.
today. And all those skill sets, all those, relationships, they have come forward. So nothing's really being replaced, right? So it's being renewed, if anything. And so that's why the book is being written, back to back. And that book is called, we'll see if the title changes because these things can get tweaked at
Oh
the
yeah.
end.
Mine shifted a little bit along
Yeah.
the way.
So this one's called, Master the PIVOT. So it's Master the Pivot, but it shows right out of the gate that it is an acronym. So it's Master the PIVOT, how bold leaders turn chaos into their competitive edge. And in there, I do a whole framework, much like you did in From Perfect to Real. So the whole acronym way of teaching just resonates with me as it does with you. And so that's why I'm really devoting a fair amount of attention, not the same amount of attention. I don't have that kind of time right now.
Right.
I have, a lot of speaking things going on, clients that I'm serving.
Right.
And we are underway. But what I don't have that you do is little kids. My kids are all older, right? So my family component looks like a supportive husband by my side, who also has a very demanding job and has gone a lot. So I have the freedom to, earmark a good amount of time, but not all the time for the second book. And it's wonderful, and who knows when it's going to come out? I mean, I'm forecasting maybe December, but the truth is I would have told you that WTF would have come out 4 months earlier than it actually did. There's so
Right.
much towards the end, right? You know this, of that process. And this isn't a matter of just like saying what you have to say and throwing it into the computer and then, spewing it out. If you're going to do it right, and we both want to do it right, it takes a minute. It takes a beat. And, and then if you're like me, I don't know if you had this, I had like an identity crisis. The book was published. I got the proof copy and I looked at it and I didn't want to read it. Like, it was really funny. I had to take a couple weeks before I would actually pick it up because
Oh yeah.
the first couple pages, I'm like, oh, why'd you say it that way? Oh, you wouldn't do it. And I was like, whoa, 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 we're not going into a judgy space like that. This is a creation that reflects where you were then. And I'm now able to read it with joy. And like your book, which I loved your book, everybody go get From Perfect to Real. Amy shares a lot of her personal, trials and triumphs and the ups and the downs of life. And the vulnerability in there creates community and connection. And that's what I seek to do. And that was the other thing the book coach said to me, the guy who read the book. He didn't write the book or tweak it or any of that. But he said to me, you have personal stories and I find them really interesting. Add more. And
Oh yeah, I
yeah,
loved all the personal stories.
yeah. I was
From the
reluctant.
acronym FEAR,
Yeah.
and you had some different ones that you shared. It was really good. So yeah,
I'm very transparent and I'm from the East Coast. So, being a Jersey girl, we kind of tell it like it is. And I just have nothing to really hide about my life, the good, bad, and the ugly. But I didn't want the book to look like a book about Danielle. I was a little concerned about losing some readers that had yet to be divorced or lose a mother or gone through the things I went through. So that was my concern. But he assured me, he said, that's not the way it is. When you read, you want to hear the soul of the author behind it. And I said, that's
yeah,
true. So in went more stories and called up the husband. And I said, listen, you're in my book quite a bit, but you're a huge part of my life and especially my growing up part and my shift into the awareness I have today. So you're in there. I don't really mention your name, but I was like, just so you know, we're going to talk about you a bit. And like, he's like so great. So
we'll talk about that. You call him
yeah,
a husband,
yeah,
not an ex-husband, and you
yeah.
describe in the book why that is. Do you want to tell those listeners now about that? And it's a husband, not
Yes,
an ex-husband.
yeah, and that's not a term I even created. Somebody said
Oh,
it to
really?
me. Yeah,
I
somebody
didn't
said
know
it to
that.
me. I was golfing about 5 years ago with a woman, and she referred to her ex as a husband, and it caught me immediately. Again, listen to
Oh, it
the
caught
end
me.
state,
Yeah.
and it caught me because it resonated with me, and I thought, and I wasn't calling Pat my ex mostly. I would say the father of my kids. And then I felt like, no, it sounds like I have a baby daddy. I mean, I was with Pat for about 25 years and we were
Right.
married for 23. We had a very amicable divorce. I mean, really towards the end, we were more, I think, roommates and friends than anything. And the lack of romantic and the emotional intimacy that really makes a marriage thrive wasn't there. And so we did a slow slide into just parenting anyway. So we took a hard look at it and we thought, okay, let's just be there for the kids and let's put what we do well together
Mhm.
just forward. He knew because I met him when I was 19 how tragic and toxic my parents were with their divorce. I mean, it was really, really ugly and it went on for our entire lives. And so we
Mm.
didn't want our own children to experience what he saw me have firsthand. Because even in my adulthood, it was really a play against, they pitted against each other our entire lives. My mother's now gone 9 years. She passed away, but it was just so awful and ugly. And we always had to choose who was going to come to Christmas, who was going to come to the baptism, who was going to, and he's like, we can't do this to our
No.
kids. And so he and I wholeheartedly agree about one thing: the kids come first and family always. And the real unique and beautiful part of this whole scenario is that mindset also exists on the other side of things. So my now husband, John, his, I don't know how you'd say wife, like not say ex.
One
I'm not
wife.
sure. Yeah, well, wife. Anyway, she's awesome, and so we have a really healthy, really great relationship. And my husband, his wife is so awesome. Like, so the one who has stepped into my old shoes, she's fantastic, and we all get along really well. And if people were to see us in a room, and that does happen, not all of us, but certainly on both sides of those equations, we're just as friend. You would think we were related because we are, the common denominator being that everybody has kids and nobody wants them to suffer
Right.
through what is now a redefined relationship. I feel very, very strongly about that. I also recognize how blessed I am, Amy, because not everybody is really dealt those cards. It takes all the people in that scenario to come forward with some compassion and some grace and a whole lot less ego. a whole lot less ego. And so I am really, really fortunate. I do my part to keep that thriving and intact, and it works well for us. Um,
It's, interesting. So what I'm kind of getting from this too is you talk a lot about your windshield in front of you versus your rear view mirror. But in this
mhm.
particular situation, because both you and him were not spending as much time in the rear view mirror or in the present or in the past, like fighting, both of you were able to kind of put your lives together to move forward and construct these, beautiful, futures, and both
Yeah.
have new partners and everything like that. And you just find that a lot of folks, they just get so wrapped up in the trivial and the fighting and all that kind of stuff versus just moving on and moving to the future. Not that there still aren't, hard feelings or anything like that, but
Yeah.
and it's just, I think in any situation in life is if you're moving more so forward than the fighting in the rearview mirror that you talk about. I
But
think it's very
sometimes people
powerful.
are abused. I mean,
Yes, there's all different situations. So
listen,
yeah,
I'm from Jersey and I can have an attitude and I can be a fighter by just like that's how I'm wired. So if I were being abused, I don't know
yeah,
that I would be so kind and patient, and that's not what occurred. And
yeah,
I was also, financially independent of him, and I think that had, and I'll tell you, well, if you read the book, I mean, that was always important to me because I saw what happened to my mother and my grandmother
yep,
when they both got divorced and they were left penniless with angry ex-husbands. And so I knew I'd always have a career because I didn't want to ever have to be beholden to a man. Like that was super important to me.
yeah,
And that's not like a mindset for everybody, but when you come from that place of trauma, you can understand why. And so I didn't feel like he had control over me per se. And so, it alleviated like the angst that some people feel like when all of a sudden they're getting the short end of the stick. And so there was just a lot of details that lent itself to me being able to be the bigger person and then them too. And look, it's never at any given day you feel like something that's happening is unfair, but that's when I check my ego. I'm like, is it really like in the scheme of things, how important is this? And I'm able to have very healthy conversations with him. Not that we talk often, we text, here or there. In fact, we're scheduled. It's really funny. We're scheduled to go skydiving together for our third child's 30th birthday. And I went with our two older children over Christmas. And I'm a woman that's afraid of heights and planes. But I jumped out of one because I thought it would be fun, and it was. And so with that, the third son who didn't go skydiving, he stood on the ground and he watched his older brothers do it with me. He thought, well, I'm sorry I didn't do that now that you survived. So can we do this for my birthday next year? So we're flying out for his 30th. And so my husband, John, is coming, of course, because it's a family party. And so I called up, Pat, the husband, and I said, hey, would you jump out of the plane? Can we make this a family thing? So like you jump out, so I'll be jumping out with the last husband, the now husband, and we're all going to go skydiving. And, just like live life to the fullest. And, that's just the way I feel about this. But anyway, getting back to the book, so the WTF, it's not so much about the moment, Amy, as it is about the pivot and what we do in that
yeah,
moment. And what I seek to create is to give some levity to those like surprises, those curveballs where we're like completely thrown off and our autopilot is disrupted, and we're saying, like what the fagana, like this is not supposed to be happening.
right.
And the truth is that in that moment, the power of pause will serve us every time. If we just consider for a second, like what our next steps can be, we don't have to remain in the state of disbelief or paralysis or even like resentment around that. Now, not every curveball is pleasant. Some of them are downright painful, and you wouldn't want them to be invited into anybody's life. But that is life. That's the way life goes. And so it's like, how can I do something positive with this? What are my next steps? And so the whole framework within it, and there's like, thank God for AI. There's endless amounts of WTFs. And I love it. It's become a movement. People talk to me or respond to my posts or even emails and use WTF language. And it's like sometimes it's stuff that I've already said, and a lot of times it's not. And I'm like, let's throw that one into the pile. And it's absolutely hilarious. I think that, laughter is not necessarily a cure, but it certainly minimizes pain sometimes, and you can find the joy. And so everybody knows what WTF means. it's universally understood. So let's look at it and feel it and experience it in a different way and know that there is an invitation to pivot with clarity and
Yep.
purpose. And it's about moving forward, which your book is too. You're saying don't get stuck in perfectionism,
Right.
right? Let's be real. So we have a real synergy, you and I'm so grateful that like we just randomly kind of like, got connected and I said, "Hey, hi, how are you?" And
Yeah.
and from there got to know who you are, a little bit about you. I'm just enjoying it.
Well, as you're
Mm.
reading your book was at a perfect time. I gained a couple things well, several things from it, but a couple of things that I've already like deployed was I realized that there's a bit of like avoidance on my part. I do a lot of really good things well, but I
Mhm.
have some habits. Like, after the kids go to bed, I'm really good about staying off social media for the most part, just maybe kind of dropping in, doing a little bit
Mhm.
here. But I can tend to scroll and scroll
Yeah.
instead of back when I was writing my book, I wouldn't. Like, I would
Yeah.
spend the night at time after my kids went to bed, like writing my book, or I was working on I was in school one time and I was doing that. And so I found that, I'm really wasting probably an hour, hour and a half at night just scrolling. And so you kind of talked about like replacing that with a better habit. So like,
Mhm.
whether it's tea or maybe I just go to bed a little earlier and I'm a morning person and then getting up more in the morning and doing that meditation, the journaling you talk about and
Mhm.
those different things. But when you framed it that way, I'm like, I really am by,
Mhm.
having these moments where, I'm just scrolling or maybe I'm having too much wine or whatever, I'm avoiding something. And so I thought that was really interesting. You talked about that. And it was something that me looking at myself in the mirror, I was like, I can see where I'm doing that. And of course, it's not all about perfection, but I felt that was very like helpful to frame it that way. And I was like, so am I avoiding something? And I can ask myself, am
Mhm.
I doing that right now? So
Yeah, I mean, we all seek relief. We're human beings, right? So we look for relief in all sorts of ways. And I don't think that most things are not bad in and of themselves, right? It's when we start to lean into them too much. And even more than that, when we're aware of it and we promise ourselves, so we put boundaries around it and we make plans to minimize it, and then we don't honor those plans.
right.
That's where it gets really slippery because when we start our self-trust and our self-esteem starts to diminish in those moments when we're breaking our own rules, right? And
Right.
that is just that gets to be a dark, uncomfortable place. But we always, we have to give ourselves grace too. And yeah,
Mhm.
journaling. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, and not everything's for anything. But when we talk about journaling or we talk about meditation, and I don't profess to be a guru in either of those areas, where I get real good at that is usually when I'm uncomfortable. And that's what I want to say about that too. I think that pain is actually such a gift. Not like, get in a car accident, have physical pain,
Mhm.
not that kind of pain. But when you are in pain, some sort of emotional pain, some sort of discomfort, you are in a heightened state of awareness, right? I mean, think about it. You can't just cruise along. And in those moments, I believe that the universe is trying to get your attention, try to get my attention. And I go, okay, what's happening here? What am I supposed to be looking at? And that's where it really helps to do the deeper dive, maybe by, quieting your brain.
Mhm.
Meditation can look like anything. You don't have to get in some sort of fancy pretzel, right? But I'll occasionally get on my knees, mostly because I'm not usually like in the state of like that to me represents surrender. And I want to surrender to whatever it is I'm supposed to be learning. Because if I don't take the opportunity to learn in that moment, what often happens is the lessons that we need to understand are presented over and over in different factual details and scenarios. And I will continue to be uncomfortable until I understand that message. So I like to, I don't think there's any shortcuts, but you certainly can shorten the time frame at which you learn something by leaning in. One of the things, Amy, that I've been saying on a lot of these podcasts, because it just keeps coming up for me, and it's truly how I live, because a mentor said to me a while back, Danielle, don't work harder, resist less. And I just want to continually share that
Mm,
message because at first I was like, no, what the heck does that mean? Don't work hard. I mean, first of all, you got to work hard. We're all taught to work hard. I work hard, that's how I get somewhere. But she's just like, you know what? This is where we start to lean towards the spin, like that spin
right.
cycle. And we're not necessarily focused on what we should be focused on. And we're giving too much of our energy. When we resist less, we're inviting the creativity and the knowledge to come
Oh, yeah.
to us. Right. So it's a simple saying that can sound somewhat complex, but it just serves me all the time. And whenever, and also, things are about timing. When any given thing is not working out, and I'm trying and trying and trying, I say, okay, now's not the time. Put it down. You pick up something else, and that's what you'll work on. Because did you ever, Amy, have a difficult time? I don't know. Like lately, it's like me learning all these different tech apps, all these things that will streamline our businesses. But you're like, now, how the hell do I work this one? Like right now, I'm working on an app called Lovable, right? That's supposed to help me like generate quizzes and more lead magnets and the blah, blah, blah. But, it's not intuitive to me. So,
Oh,
but
yeah.
and when I get into that struggle where I'm trying, I'm like, okay, it's not happening on Monday. I'll pick it back up. And then all of a sudden I'll look at it with fresh eyes, less anxiety. And it's like, oh, now I see it. Right. So
Right.
don't be afraid to shelve the things that aren't working in the moment, even if that means shelving them for 3 hours. We tend to, just think that more is better. And that's not always the case.
I had the craziest situation just
Yeah.
happen right before our call. When I told you I was putting together a deal.
Mhm.
One of my secret weapons in commercial real estate is I like to write letters. So
Okay.
whether I had a coffee with someone, or let's say I have a client that wants to buy a building, or I want to buy a building, I'll
Mhm.
write a letter. I'll put it in like some special like envelope, and I'll mail it to someone's house. And I had one of the clients that bought a building last year, and they said to me, I want to buy one of the units next door. We tried and tried and tried and tried, and obviously he only has two options. In
Mhm.
the condos that he's in, they're industrial condos, and the one, it was just not working. We were banging our heads up against the wall, and they were not. And then the other one, I wrote a letter, and this is a pretty big company, pretty well-known family, and
Mhm.
they're not using it. It's full of stuff. And I was like, I'm gonna write a letter, but I'm gonna also copy this. We did not hear back from weeks, and I told my client, I said, do not worry. If this is meant to be, this is going to happen. I got a call from them today, and they said, not only are we ready to sell, we've already started clearing out the unit. We're going to have it cleared out in the next 2 months, and we definitely want to sell. And let's try to close around Labor Day. And I called my client, and he's like, no way. Did you write a letter to the COO of this pretty big company that has their name on the side of a building and
Yeah,
come to my
yeah.
house, and they called you back? And I'm like, yes, I did. And it's funny, I talk in my book about my uncle that liked to write letters, and like
Yes.
all the different things you talk about, little breadcrumbs and all those
Mhm.
different. And then why don't we all as people like embrace our gifts and use those as like our secret like abilities, and utilize it to make things easier for ourselves? Because that's my tool. I don't like as much cold calling and saying, hi, my name is Amy Calandrino. Would you like to hear a little about market trends? Can you have 27 seconds? And doing it's not my thing. Like, I know it works
Yeah.
for many brokers, and I'm not dissing any coaches that tell them to do it, but it's just not my style. My style is go to like an local area, like wine event tasting,
Mhm.
and meet some people there. And then they're like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about buying a building. Or it's just, mine is a different flow. So I don't know what you want to say about that.
No,
You talked
I
a
mean,
little bit about it in the book, is just kind of going where your kind of energy goes.
well, I mean, that's brilliant because really anybody that's selling anything, they're not selling the product they're selling themselves. The
Right.
only thing we're selling is you. So it's your values, your story, your everything. And so you're doing it the way that is personal to you. So I mean that just gives you the lead in as much as you're being authentic. Also, not many people write letters anymore. What I find that a very, very powerful thing. I'm interested to know how you get the home address of these, like, semi-famous people, because sometimes that's hard. But
I
we
figured
can,
out Joe Rogan's address,
yeah.
but
Well, there
you
you
called
go.
me a little
So
bit of an Aaron Brockovich. But I
D,
think I'm going
D,
to mail him a book.
DM Amy, she's got the goods. Okay, I know there's a few people I want to send my book. I'm like, how do I get their address? But it is brilliant, and at the end of what we're always trying to do is create connection. And so what's more personal than a handwritten letter? It certainly trumps calls or emails by any stretch, and it meets them where they are. So they open it when they are able to. And then there's something about seeing words like that. I think that we're starved to see handwritten notes, to tell you the truth, because it just doesn't exist anymore. It's like even, I mean, I'm thinking about it out loud. I'm like, all we do is we read emails, we read texts. Texts have replaced phone calls for younger generations. Like, we are getting further and further away from the personal touch, right? And so that is, no, it's the way to go. And so, but for somebody who's not comfortable with it, they wouldn't, because they wouldn't do it well. It
Right.
works for you. And I think that anything that works for that person, where they can engage in the state of flow, well, then do that. Just make sure you show up, and then show up and show up for them and not yourself, right? So it's always about the other side.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what I found was really interesting that you talked about in your book, and it really made me also pause, is pruning with purpose.
Mhm.
And kind of, I'm starting to think of, like, what does 2026 Amy look like, and what are the pillars that are going to be most important to me, and like, how can I do that? And what I found was interesting is you can ask yourself, like, what are you holding on to that no longer serves you? Do you
Mhm.
want to talk a little bit about that when you're continuing to grow and develop as a
Yeah,
woman and a mom?
it's so uncomfortable, but that, pruning with purpose really goes to the value of shedding. That's shedding places, people, things. There are things sometimes don't serve us forever and ever and ever. I do believe that a lot of things in life come with an expiration date, and we feel, I don't know, maybe negative about letting it go. They feel guilty and whatnot, even when it comes to relationships. And so sometimes it's just, it works in everybody's best interest to move on. A lot of people, myself included, I'll think about what I need to add. I need to add this person, this place, this thing. And that sometimes is true in life. But at the same time, what are you releasing? There are all sorts of things, even starting with habits, like you talked about the scroll. There's things that we need to release and we need to shed, or at least curate, so that they begin to serve us and work with us instead of against us.
Uh-huh.
So pruning with purpose is being just, taking almost like into account, how are you spending your time? Who are you hanging around with? What needs to go, not just what needs to come.
Right. Well, a lot of people say that they don't have time, but perhaps you're doing some things that don't necessarily serve you.
Yeah.
So, one thing I have not been putting as diligently is necessarily like my health this year,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I could use the time that I'm spending on Instagram to go and log my stuff into MyFitnessPal and study that information, study the information on my Whoop band, and then what could I be doing better to
Mhm.
ultimately get me towards my fitness goals, so that I'm like able to keep up on the track with my kids. And I'm pretty darn fit and active and all that, but there's always room for improvement. And so the replacing one habit with another, and having that purpose, I think, is so important.
It is. Um, it's funny because we always focus, or tend to focus, successful people, and you are one, tend to focus on the things like that they're not doing, instead of all the things that they are, all
Yeah.
the boxes that you're checking, like with gold stars on it, right? So in the book, I do talk about, two different things. One, keeping an achievement journal. So when you do get around to logging that in, like celebrate that win, WTF, win tiny first, right? So, give yourself grace about when you didn't log in, to your fitness app. The, the funny thing is, we are just human beings living
Yeah.
in a spiritual world, right? We are going to be fallible. We're going to be weak. We're going to look for relief. We're going to try to get the fastest way that we can get somewhere. We don't want shortcuts, but we're never going to do that perfectly. And that's why your book is such an important message out there, because perfectionism doesn't exist. A lot of us strive for it. And for what? And what's really cool, Amy, is that I have seen, I'm older than you are. I've seen a major shift to how what is really being embraced today is the flaws, is the realness, People are so hungry to know, who are you without all the crap? You can simultaneously have a lot of success, and that doesn't just necessarily mean in business or with your bank account. You can be successful in life, and you can also have some hardships and struggles at the same time. And so being able to see the entire picture, that's what people are starved for. So, it's just, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the fitness thing, I struggled with that for a little bit. I'm not good at logging or anything like that. You get more hours when you do the things that are on your mental to-do list. And I'll tell you what, about 6 years ago, I was going through, 7 years now, a major life transition. And so I was seeking all the things in terms of how I would embrace going into sobriety. And so I ended up enlisting the help of a transcendental meditation coach. I thought, okay, I got to slow this brain. I got to be intentional and purposeful. So I worked with this woman well, you don't really work. You go through a little ceremonial thing. You get your mantra, and you're tasked with doing it 20 minutes twice a day. And I remember thinking at the time, like, who's got time to be sitting 20 minutes twice? Like, that's 40 minutes, right? This is going to be like, how am I going to fit this? I'm catching planes like every 4 days, like for work. Like, this is just not going to happen. And the reverse happened when I was practicing that religiously. And it literally was a flushing of my head. And I ended up, never mind spending 40 minutes, 20 times two, I gained, I swear to God, hours, because I was capable of resetting and being in a place of just like higher performance. There's a lot of stars and celebrities and whatnot that come out and say they do transcendental meditation. So if they've got time with their busy schedules, we certainly do as well. So logging into the fitness app, if you were to pick that up a little bit more, you then wouldn't be crowded. You would find more time in your day just because you did it and it wasn't in your head and it actually occurred. It's off our plate.
Yeah.
Right? But we look for motivation, and motivation is really a pile of BS. I mean, it feels so good when we're in a state of motivation, but what we have to awaken is our discipline. And everybody has discipline. Like, people be like, I'm not disciplined. I'm like, yeah, you are. It just might be taking a snooze. So let's awaken it. And when we awaken our discipline, it doesn't feel comfortable. So again, as human beings, we're like, well, that sucks. I don't want to do it. Right? Yet you don't want to do it. And all that has to happen is, and this is not necessarily easy, but we have to do it until we want to. It's like anything in life. Do it until you want to.
Oh, yeah.
And then the game just changes. But, there's no shortcut from, there to here. It's just, that's the way it is. But how liberating is that? And I'm always looking to be liberated. I want to be as free as I possibly can. I mean, that's just, it feels good. And now that I've experienced it, I nurture that. And I pay close attention to the decisions and choices I make on a daily basis.
Let's welcome the freedom.
Yeah. There you go. There we go. We WTF'd it. We did.
Yeah, we did.
I love that.
What a way to end. Yeah, this has been good.
It. Yeah.
Well, let's definitely keep in touch. This has been awesome. So what is the best way for folks to find you?
I'm on all the platforms, but if you visit my website, at unscriptedpivots.com, and it's spelled just the way it sounds, I'll screw it up if I try to spell it, but at unscriptedpivots.com, there you'll see the links to, I'm on X, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Substack, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on like pretty much all of it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And, none of it where I, pay huge amounts of attention to it. You look at my Instagram and like, does she ever post? I mean, I'll go into seasons of where I really reside. Today, it's mostly LinkedIn and on X, where you do as well. Yeah.
We met on LinkedIn. There we go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But this is cool. This is actually for my listeners. I took a month off from recording. Danielle was like, wait, what do you mean in June? I'm like, I'm taking some time off. This is weird and it's uncomfortable, but I feel like I'm being called to do this and I'm going to do it. And it was hard at first, but it was awesome. But that's how you reach her. So I will go ahead and tell everybody, thanks for listening to the Performance Mindset Show. If today's episode gave you something to think about, share it and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. You want to go deeper? Grab my book, From Perfect to Real. It's all about dropping perfection and thriving your own way. And then also get Danielle's book too. And you can connect with me at beyondcommercial.com or amycalandrino.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep showing up for you. This is Amy Calandrino, signing off.